Shalom, shalom to everyone watching. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, and we're going to continue chapter 4 of To Be a Jew as a summary. And we were looking at kindness as a means and an end. And we finished off looking at kindness as the concept of kindness in areas of the laws of charity as we start going into the different levels of acts of charity. The concept of kindness, as we said, includes all forms of kindness shown by a person whenever he exerts himself on behalf of another. To refuse all such service one may render a neighbor without himself suffering detriment is worthy of Sodom, which means it's the punishment of Sodom. But even when we serve other people, it may result to our inconvenience or injury of our own interests, and we are commanded in every page of Scripture and in the Talmudical work to exercise humanity and show love for our fellow human beings. The Torah teaches us, and ye shall love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. And therefore a person is bidden to praise the virtue of another just as he would like himself to be praised and to be protective about his friend's asset, so he should about his own. Commenting the practice of the implementation of the biblical rule, which is mentioned by Hillel and others, what is hateful for you to do, do not do to others. What is hateful to you, do not do to others. It's a religious duty, a mitzvah, commandment, to extend hospitality of one's home and food and lodging as the need arise. It is a religious duty to visit a person who is taken ill, friends and family, who regularly sees the sick person should visit him as soon as possible upon hearing about the illness. Others should wait at least a period of 3 days before doing so. It's a religious commandment to visit a person in mourning, to comfort him in sorrow. It's also a great mitzvah, a great commandment to provide funds to enable orphaned girls and very poor girls to marry. As a matter of fact, we did a whole campaign regarding the orphans, and we're still running that campaign to help do some corrections in the orphanage that they need, some restructuring, as it were. It's a mitzvah to personally provide for the return of a lost object and rightful owners. It is written, you must surely return it. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 1. One is required to protect the money or property of another from being lost, destroyed, or damaged. This falls within the observance of the biblical principle or precept of returning a lost item. If one sees a neighbor whose life is in danger and he is in a position to help or can engage to help someone, he is obligated to do so at every trouble and expense to do so, though he may later seek to be reimbursed for the expense. If he refrains from taking any action, he transgresses the biblical precept, and you shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 16. Similarly, if one becomes aware of a conspiracy against another and continues to mind his own affairs, doing nothing to reveal the danger to his fellow man, he also transgresses the biblical precept, and ye shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. You know, what made me very sad not too long ago, seeing a video of some ultra-religious people, as one fellow Jew is being attacked and left almost bloodied. And these religious people, I'm talking about tall religious Jews, did absolutely nothing to stop the battering. They stood idly by as a man was being beat to the pulp. This is not a Jewish idea to just look the other way and pretend they can't see it. And you understand, when you see this type of behavior from the ultra-religious, you begin to wonder, is this what God wants? No, my friends. We need to be able to stop violence if it's right in our face. If you have the ability, do so. If you don't have the ability, call for help. But to stand idly by with your hands crossed and absolutely looking at the situation and like afraid to do anything, that was the mentality that existed some hundreds of years ago in Germany His fellow Jews were being killed and exploited by other Jews, like George Soros. I couldn't help that because you know what? His behavior is not anything close to being within what Judaism requires. Rabbi Yeshua said, the evil eye, jealousy, and the evil inclination, lust, and the hatred of mankind puts a man out of this world. Hatred. What is hatred of mankind? Well, whenever one say, love the sages but hate the disciples, love the disciples or the students but hate the common people. The laws of charity are the following. It's tzedakah, literally means righteously, but commonly used to signify charity. It's a trait of the seed of our father Abraham, for it is written, for I have known him, that he may instruct his children and his posterity. To do righteousness, tzedakah, to do justice. Genesis chapter 18, verse 19, or Bereshit chapter 18, verse 19. The giving of charity is greater than all of the offerings, for it is written, the doing of righteousness and justice is preferable to the Lord than sacrificial offerings. Which means all of the offerings that you're doing, if it's not to help a fellow human being, what use is it? Proverbs chapter 21, verse 3. Israel will not be redeemed except through the practice of tzedakah. For it is written, Zion. For those anti-Zionist Jews, listen to this very carefully. Zion. You know, the Jews that are not so religious as you, Zion will be redeemed in justice, and her returnees with tzedakah. What are we seeing today? As Israel is being attacked by its enemies, even these anti-Zionist religious Jews, Zion will be redeemed by the tzedakah that the Jews give over to help those families in Israel. This is why we did the campaign. We're doing a campaign. We're only just shy below $1,000. And obviously, we are pushing for $10,000 to help. So if you can help and you see the campaign online, please donate. It's not for me. It's to help families that are in need in Israel during this very time of war. Interesting, I got various posts from pro-Hamas Palestinians and saying, oh, free Palestine. I said, you know what? I would be willing, listen closely, I would be willing to organize a fundraiser to provide education or re-education to Palestinian children who needs to be deprogrammed by their anti-hate and hatred doctrine that they have been filled from young. I'll be willing to do that. Obviously, I would need partners to be able to achieve this in Israel if these individuals are willing to be re-educated and shake off the horrible indoctrination and forming that they received, unfortunately, from their parents and from their culture and from the institution that is completely considered a terrorist institution. I'll be willing to do that, to push for that, to push for the funding of it, of such a new educational system that would replace the hatred that's being taught to Palestinian children and family. To me, it's abusive. It's child abuse. That's why I can't support anything that has to do with Hamas sympathizers, because they want terrorism to continue. It is a biblical precept to give charity to a poor, for it is written, if there be among you a needy person, one of your brethren, you must surely open your hand. Don't close it. Open it to give. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7 through 8. And you shall maintain him, whether a stranger or sojourner. He shall live beside you. Leviticus 25, verse 35. If one sees a poor man seeking charity and turns his eyes away so to avoid giving charity, such a person transgresses a biblical commandment. Do not harden your heart, nor shut your hands from your needy brother, but give him. Give. Even if it's not what he actually needs, but you give, you are still helping out. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7. One must feed and clothe the poor, of the Gentiles, of the Goyims, together with the poor of Israel. This applies to all forms of charitable work, be they orphans, be they widows, be they poor people that they've fallen down the crack. You need to feed both Jew and Gentile alike. There is a priority as to where the giving ought to go, and we'll take a look at that in a few. But one thing I said, for example, right now we're dealing with a major homeless issue, homelessness, and people living on the streets because they don't have the money, supposedly. There are some solutions that I have conjured up. I'm just waiting for the proper time to put it into action. But if you want to be part of providing actual humanitarian solutions to problems that we face, give me a call. We'll work together, not a problem. I'm all for giving. I'm all for helping humanity from its sorrows and its pain. Jews are into this, very much so. So are Christians. They're into giving and helping the poor and the needy. We're doing it for the sake of God, God's sake, to help hurting people in need. Just look at what's going on in Miami. Homelessness at an all-time high rate. People living on the streets, starting to look like a tent city. They're camping out to live in the streets. Well, we know that's happening in Los Angeles because of the social leftist ignoramus. But solutions to problem, it's right in our hands. We can solve it. If only we do what is right before God. God first, then the order will become naturally. Every person is required to give tzedakah according to his means. Every poor man who is himself a recipient of tzedakah, who is himself sustained on social welfare, is required to give tzedakah, even if he can only give a little. One of the things that the religious community has been blasted in a couple of past years is their bad derrick in relying on social services. Becoming on the welfare. They're always looking to be supported and sustained by social services. It's pitiful. It really is pitiful. Knowing that we are to be people who are givers and providers of those who are in hurt and pain, and not to assume that we are just give me for ourselves. So every person is required. As little is as worthy as a greater sum than even those given by the rich. But if the poor man has barely enough to sustain himself, he is exempt from giving, and since sustaining himself takes precedence over sustaining someone else, this is the real law. Interesting, some years ago they asked me, Rabbi, I'm a Christian, and my leader, my pastor, tells me that I have to give my tithes to the church even when I am in need, even when my mother is needing my help. Guess what my answer was to that person? Pastors may not like me for this, but I told him, you know what? The commandments and the idea of giving tzedakah begins at home. If your mother, your father, even you yourself are in need of tzedakah, you have a right to keep whatever ma'aser, tithing, that you're giving. If you want to get out of your impoverishment, you got to learn how to give. That's a rule that's very clearly taught in Torah. And Christians have borrowed from us that concept of giving tithe, giving the 10%, because it's a mitzvah to give. It's a good practice to separate 10% of your income, which you receive, in order to give. It's a good custom. It's not a bad custom. It's a custom that creates character, and it creates the importance of giving. How much tzedakah should a person give? A medium measure would be a tenth. 10%. This is what's called tithing, and of what one has earned. In our days, when taxes must be paid to the government, and these taxes are often withheld from one's wages, it must be surmised that one's income is the amount that the person is left with after tax. Not like these TV preachers say, no, before tax. Oh, after tax, what you actually receive from that you give. All who shows mercy, mercy will be shown to them. For it is written, the Lord will be kind and compassionate to you, and will multiply you. The whole idea is show kindness and compassion, and God will multiply you. God will multiply your needs and your sustenance. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 18. Giving gifts to one's mother and father, if they are needy of such help, is regarded to be an observance of various mitzvahs. The mitzvah of tzedakah, and the mitzvah of taking care and honoring your father and mother. The poor of one's own household does take precedence over the poor of one city. The poor of one city takes precedence over the poor of another city. The poor inhabitants of the Holy Land, listen closely, the poor inhabitants of the Holy Land takes precedence over the poor inhabitants of the diaspora. In other words, we that are in exile. So this is the reason why we're doing a campaign, which I hope and pray everyone who is watching will give to this campaign. Our goal is to reach $10,000 to be able to help families in Israel. And so it is a mitzvah to give to those families in Israel over those that are here in exile. So go to the link of helping Jewish families in Israel. We're at right now at about $900. We need $10,000 to be able to help out. And this would be our way of saying, count on us. We are here to say we stand with Israel. We stand with the Jewish families in Israel. And here is the demonstration of such action. It's forbidden to turn a poor person away empty-handed. If he is given but a small amount, if one truly has nothing to give, the poor person's feelings should not be depreciated, rather assuaged. Give him comforting words, prayer, but give him something to hold on to. Hope is one of the greatest things you can give a person that is in need, but also a little bit of money too. Tzedakah should be given cheerfully, sympathetically, and one who gives it in such a manner and not with a gloomy expression like, here you go. Even if he gives a magnificent amount, he loses the merit of his own deed and violates a commandment of the Torah. And your heart shall not be grieved when you give. Don't be sad. Don't be embarrassed. Deuteronomy 15:10 tells us that we should be happy when we're giving. We should be exhilarated when we're giving. And the receiver should be happy that he's being given the gift to help sustain himself. It is forbidden to rebuke a poor man in anger or raise one's voice to him, for his heart is already broken. His spirit is crushed. A broken and contrite heart. He is right there at the mercies of God and at the very ears of God. So if he says something that you may not like, be careful. Woe to him who puts a poor man to shame. You got to take care of a true poor person. Well, Rabbi, you have so many beggars on the streets. You still got to give. But they may be cheating and defrauding me. You still got to give something, even a blessing. Here are the levels of charity, each one higher than the other. And I hope all of you will get involved according to your levels and abilities to do charitable work. The 8th level and lowest level of charity is when one gives charity grudgingly. That's the worst level, but that's you might say the lowest level. You might say the guttural level, the street level. Here you go. The 7th level is when one gives less than he should, but does so cheerfully. The guy needs $100, but he only gives him $5. But he does it with such a happiness about it. The 6th level is when one gives directly to the poor upon being asked. The poor asks, he gives. The 5th level is when one gives alms directly to the poor without even being asked. He sees the need, and what does he do? He goes into action. The 4th level is when he's giving it in an indirect form. The recipient knows who the giver is, but the giver does not know the identity of the recipient. In other words, this is where we have intermediates involved in receiving the money, but the person receiving the money or the help doesn't see who's giving it. Third level is when the giver knows the identity of the recipient, but the recipient does not know the identity of the giver. Never forget, one time someone, when I was living in Yorba Linda, California, someone who knew me, but I didn't know them, sent me an envelope through the mail, which was dangerous, by the way. You don't do this. Sent me an envelope with $500 because during that period of time, I was going through unemployment and it was crazy. It was hard. And, you're living kosher. It's not cheap. And they sent me in an envelope $500. You have no idea how much blessings. When I received those $500, I gave to the person in my prayers, although I didn't know who it was. Probably will never know who it was. That person received so much prayers and blessings from my behalf to him. This is the third level, when the giver knows the identity of the recipient, but the recipient doesn't know who the identity of the giver. Recipients, learn to bless the people who are helping you. Don't just take that for granted. Bless the person who is giving it, even though you may not know who is the one giving it. The second highest level is one who gives is unaware of the recipient, who in turn is unaware of the giver. In contributing to charity fund, one who gives in this way, communal funds administered by responsible people are also in this category. The highest form of charity is to help sustain a person before he becomes impoverished. By offering a substantial gift in dignified manner and extending a suitable loan, not a gift, or by helping him find employment or establishing him in some type of business as to make it unnecessary for him to become dependent upon others. In other words, independency. Make the person independent of having to ask over and over and over again. This is the truest, highest level of charity. In other words, someone out there will buy a house, rent out the house, and from the funds of that house be giving sustenance to someone that is in need. Even in this level, the sages and the rabbis used to do this all the time from those who were their disciples. What would they do? Let me tell you what they would do. And this was a beautiful thing because it would allow the leader, the rabbi, the teacher, the chacham, to be able to dedicate themselves fully in the work of teaching over the Jewish law and halakha without worrying about where his money would be coming from. And so a couple of people would come together and say, you know what, we're going to sustain Rabbi Moshe. And we want him to dedicate himself completely to giving over himself Torah teachings. And we're going to pay for everything he needs. His living cost, his food cost, everything. And so they would put a business in play, and from that business they would not only pay their employees, but would sustain the rabbis to make it possible for a sage or scholar to do his work while secure his livelihood's merits inheritance of the world to come. This refers to even handling the assets of a scholar in a way that will provide him with an income and free his mind to engage in the study of Torah. To inspire and to bring others to tzedakah is a great virtue, and it's meritorious, even a great reward than that of the donor. Of those who do this, it is written, Daniel chapter 12, verse 13, those who turn the many to righteousness shall be like the stars. In other words, you want to be a star? Sustain, make it your goal to underwrite the life of a Torah sage or a rabbi, and this way you will be a star. Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. I could use some stars right now. I'm not talking about the one that Facebook has. When you press a star, you donate regularly $2 every month. I could use those too. A pledge to tzedakah must be paid immediately. To be tardy, although one is capable of immediately redeeming a pledge, is a violation of biblical precept. When you make a vow to the Lord, your God, do not put it off fulfilling it. Deuteronomy 23, verse 22. However, if it's understood at the time that the pledge that is to be redeemed at a specified time, one may wait until those times. I'll never forget one of the people that basically I was teaching said, Rabbi, I promise you I'm going to give you $1,000 when my deal for real estate closes. And believe it or not, the deal closed successfully, and she got her commission, and she also paid her vow. See, those are the type of people that are unique in our society, because when you have money in your hand, you forget these people and you spend what you said you promised to give. That is a violation, a biblical violation. And this person knew that and received an incredible blessing. And blessings continue to work in their life as a result of making that type of commitment and following through with that commitment. All of the foregoing rules about tzedakah concern themselves with the obligation and duties of the donor. But there are some obligations and rules that is upon the potential recipient. One should strive not to become a public charge, a leech, and not become dependent upon others. In other words, you need to have a way to have self-sufficiency. Even distinguished scholars and honored persons who become impoverished should find manual labor, even the most menial type, rather than to become dependent upon charities of others. The sages taught us that to act in this way is to set this example. Believe me, I prefer working than receiving gifts from others. Now I'm receiving gifts in order to be able to do tzedakah on behalf of others. Completely different idea. But if one cannot subsist unless he does receive tzedakah, he should not hesitate to accept it. But if he's proud and refuses tzedakah, he is compared to one who takes his own life. One who sorrows adds transgression. So, if you have to beg, beg. Especially if it's to sustain yourself, do so. Don't be ashamed. There's no shame in asking for help when help is needed. It's a religious duty to lend money to the poor. And if you lend money to the poor people, it's as if you're loaning money to God. Exodus chapter 22, verse 24. I'll never forget when I was living in the Aventura area. There was a family that needed help. And so I asked people to lend a help to this family. I think they needed something like $1,000. And that family was going to try to pay back as they could. Obviously, could not pay back because their situation got so worse they ended up moving to Israel. Even though Scripture says if our sages regarded this as an if, it's a when, and not a permissive act, but as an obligatory one. If a person lends a poor person money among Israel, among Jews, he can't pay it back. Don't be as a creditor, to be nagging for the repayment of the loan. The reason why they lend it is because they're in need. The mitzvah of lending money to the poor is greater than the mitzvah of giving tzedakah to those who ask for it. For the latter were already compelled to ask. The former were not yet reduced to that level. Even if a rich man has to borrow, it's a mitzvah to lend to him, if its merit is to offer beneficial advice and guidance. It is forbidden to press the return of a loan when one knows the borrower does not possess the means to repay it. It's forbidden to repress for the return of the loan. Stop pushing for the person to have it paid. He can't do it. Look at it as a canceled debt, as a tzedakah. And the Torah says, they shall not be to him as a creditor. Exodus chapter 22, verse 33. It's also similarly forbidden for the borrower to procrastinate with a repayment when he has the funds to which repay his debt. For it is written, do not tell your neighbor, go and come back again. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 28. So it's also wrong not to repay a debt when you have the ability to repay it. He who has the funds of another in his possession, either as a loan due or wage that are due, and does not pay back, but procrastinate, and says, "Go and come back again tomorrow," violates the commandment, and you shall not oppress your neighbor. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 13. Don't take an attitude thinking you're not supposed to pay back the loan because you're somehow higher than and more mightier than others, and you could be able to steal and commit fraud. I had a person that I knew that basically clung to me, unfortunately, going throughout all Latin America, saying that I said to lend him money. He was my financier administrator. No. And he was basically stealing money from people, which I did not authorize, nor did I give him permission. And I said to them that I told him that he was the guy. His name is known in the Facebook world and in the social media world. And the guy, I still to this day warn people, stay away from him. He's a fraud. He is a scammer. And if he sees that you have money that he can steal, he'll even invent whatever is necessary to basically scam you from it. There are people you need to stay away from. That is one of those people. He's currently right now, I think, in the Orlando or Tampa area in an Orthodox synagogue. God help those community members that are being attacked by this guy, because really he's a big scammer, and he dresses very, very piously like a religious Orthodox Hasidic Jew. Unfortunately. Laws relating to slander, revenge, and deceit. Torah says very clearly, "You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people." Leviticus chapter 19, verse 16. A talebearer is one who goes about saying, "I heard this and this about so-and-so." Even if what he says is true, he transgresses the commandment. Tale-bearing is a great sin and can cause great bloodshed, literally and figuratively. People have died for Lashon Hara. People have been slaughtered for the misinformation. If anything we're seeing today is this same thing, but on a larger global level, led by our own government and government official. And that is why this precept is immediately followed by the one that says, "And you shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor." This is even a greater sin that is included in the prohibition, that is the evil tongue. It's called Lashon, which is tongue, the tongue, Hara, of evil, the tongue of evil. This refers to one who goes about discrediting another, telling uncomplimentary things about him, even if they're true. One who speaks outright falsehoods is called a spreader of evil, malicious and false report. Motzi Shemra. In other words, he's basically destroying the person's reputation in front of others to be able to diminish that person's ability to gain, to bring people to himself. These are people that are sick, morally speaking. They have an illness. They're lepers. They're moral lepers. If today the ability to be able to detect them was activated by God, you would see a lot of leprous people among the Jewish community, in particular, the religious, ultra-religious people. Why? Because these are the people that think that they can get away with doing this type of evil on purpose and get away with it. Oh, I heard that so-and-so and so-and-so. I would know even some people in certain communities that have this status because they have disseminated lies and falsehood about even myself. The Hasidic tale of a man is a very good tale that you should read in chapter 4, pages 52, 53 of the book. Very interesting story. I'm not going to go in there, but the whole idea is that basically one of the rabbis was offended because this guy had spoken bad about him, ruined his reputation, and then he came, just before Yom Kippur, asking him for forgiveness. He says, "You know what? I'll forgive you after you do the following thing. Take a pillowcase, a feathered pillowcase, open it up, go to the highest building here, and just let out all the feathers. Then he came back, okay, I did what you asked me to do. So now go pick up every single feather that was spread by the wings and try to pick them up. And despite your sincere remorse and willingness to correct your evil that you have done to me, it is as possible to repair the damage that you have done by your mouth as it is in recovering every single feather that the wind took. And that's the truth. No matter what, there's some moron, ignoramus out there that will always believe the Lashon Hara that was told. And thus it gets retold. Now, and I'm going to be very honest with you at this point. Our religious community is perhaps the most egregious or culpable ones involved in this thing. This is why there's a whole bunch of series of teachings about the laws of Lashon Hara and Moshe Shemra, and apparently those who basically are more learned in these areas of law are the ones that commit them more often, more frequent. So, one who unprotestingly listens to evil tongue is morally of a lower caliber than one who possesses it. Were it not for those who are willing to listen to it, no damage would be caused. Even paying attention to what they call the gossips, the chismes, it causes a person who's hearing all types of moral damages. To make snide remarks or pass a nasty gossip, not in any hateful way, but in levity and just joking, I'm just kidding, borders on the category of an evil tongue. And let's be honest, we're all guilty of having done this some time of our life. This is why we have a lot of corrections to do with that small member called the tongue. He who insists upon praising a person before that person's enemy, encouraging them to respond with criticism and fault-finding, causes no good but only harm. You ever had the person that basically would diss you, would make you feel like you're not even worthy of any mention? Literally just forget you even existed, in order so that they would receive all of the kavod. Oh, look what I did. This beckons to that same type of idea. 4 types of persons are not worthy of the divine presence. Now I want you to listen to this. God does not even enter their midst. So don't say, God is with me. Idlers, insincere flatterers, those that basically speaks a whole bunch of good words in front of you, but in back of you, basically they're backstabbing you. It responds with criticism and fault-finding, causes no good but only harm. There are 4 types that are not worthy of the divine presence. Idlers, insincere flatterers, liars, and those who talk with an evil tongue. Evil tongue is Lashon Hara. It's forbidden to take revenge. Constitutes a violation of the Torah commandment. You shall not take revenge. Leviticus 19:18. One of the things that I've done to try to avoid taking revenge on some of the people that really have hurt me is basically just block them. I can't handle you right now. Talk to the hand. What you've done was so egregious that basically I can't handle talking with you at this moment. What I would like to do is wring you by the neck. How dare you? But instead you hold back, you take a deep breath, wait until your anger ceases, and then resume from there. But never take revenge. It's only harmful to the person who does it. Leviticus 19 verse 18, our religious teachers advised that if one is possessed by a strong desire for revenge, one should instead try adding to his own good qualities. And let this be your revenge. They said, for surely your enemies will be upset upon hearing your good virtues extolled and your good name spread. Even if they're spreading your name under the bus. On the other hand, if you resort to ugly deeds, your enemies will rejoice at the shame and discredit you, for you are causing yourself thereby by revenging himself. it doesn't do you any good to speak bad about the person that's doing bad to you. It is forbidden to carry a grudge. This too is a transgression of the Torah. You shall not harbor a grudge. Leviticus 19, verse 18. It's forbidden to curse another person in any language. Now, what do you mean by curse? Well, there are ways around this, and I'm not going to explore that with you, but there's ways to be able to bless someone, which in fact that blessing is not a blessing, it's in fact a curse. But you're not to curse anyone in any language. It's forbidden to wrong another with words, to insult, to cause anguish or pain. And unfortunately, we're all guilty of that too. To wrong with words is greater sin to wrong with one with money matters. But normally a person who feels humiliated, they want to whip back. They want to get back at you. And that type of reaction creates a series of other issues, including Lashon Hara. For the latter is subject to compensation, it can be made good, but the former is not. The latter is against man's possession, the former is directed against the person himself. So you have something against me? Okay. Say it to me. I apologize. Let's get it right. Let's get on moving. But usually most people are not that way. You shall not wrong one another, but you shall fear your God. Remember who will pay for everything? God. God will pay back. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 17. Wronging with words, including any statements that will cause another pain or distress. Any remarks that will hurt another by bringing up unpleasant reminders of the past, or that will be insulting or embarrassing to a person when he hears it. Even such expressions as, "You're such a behemoth." You're such a fool. It's forbidden to call someone by a derogatory nickname, even by using his name, and by calling him a nickname to whom is directed is already accustomed to hearing it, is no longer embarrassed by it, as long as he uses it and intends to hereby embarrass the other person, deliberately emphasize it as a derogatory meaning. This includes your ex-spouses. Hey, forbidden to put another to shame, be he a child, adult, whether by words or by deeds. This is so in private, especially so in front of others. One may not call another by a name that is embarrassing to him, says things that might embarrass him before others. Such an action is said he puts another to shame in public, as it's though he spilt blood. One who puts another to public shame or ridicule has no share in the world to come. It is forbidden to steal another's thoughts. To deceive another person, even in non-monetary matters. Some examples of this, for example, are: a man should not insist that his friends eat with him, and thus intending to prove his friendship, when he knows that his friend cannot and will not accept the invitation because he can't stand him. A man should not offer a gift knowing in advance that it will not be accepted. A man is prohibited from selling even to a non-Jew non-kosher meat if the non-Jew is under the impression that he's buying kosher meat. It's prohibited. You're faking him out. You're committing a fraud. A man's heart and mouth should be the same. One must not speak one way and think another. That's hypocrisy. And that's also forbidden. From the words, you must have an honest hin. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 36. Sages derived from this lesson that a man's yes is yes and a man's no is no. And he must be a man of his word. If you're not a man of your word, you have no value of your word. One must abide by his word, even if one is not given in the form of an oath or a promise. If you said you're going to do it, do it. He who does not lacks integrity, and the spirit of the sages is grieved by such a behavior. Thus a man who says to say to a friend that he intends to give him a gift and then doesn't give him lacks integrity. This is so when the potential recipient took the promise at face value and believed that he would receive it. If the promise of a gift was made to a poor person, a poor man, whether it be small or large, whether it be of the sort which the poor man believed he would receive and took it at statement at face values or not, the benefactor may not go back on his word or his promise. A statement to the poor man assumes the status of a vow concerning which the Torah teaches us, whatever proceedeth out of your lips, you shall keep. You gotta watch what you say, because your words do have power to commit yourself into all types of issues and situations that you'll find difficult to get yourself out of. The verse, he who speaks truth in the heart, Psalms 15 verse 2, teaches us that even at a higher level of ethical value, it's a matter arising between a man and his fellow man, and one should fulfill even that which he only has mentally decided upon. For example, you're here listening to me and you thought, you know what, I'm going to really help this rabbi. I'm going to really help the organization. I'm going to donate $1 million to him. Or you have that intention. You're now obligated internally to complete your vow that you had in your mind. If one decides in his heart to make a particular charitable contribution, one is duty bound to pay it in accordance with the decision that one has made for oneself, even if one did not actually utter the words of those promises. So you see, the commitment begins from here. So if you committed yourself to help our organizations, then do so. Don't pull back. Don't hold back. Don't decide to do the opposite. Now, in our next video, we're going to be looking at the laws between work and wages, employer-employee situations and relationship in the actions of kindness, the area of kindness to animals, the acts of righteousness or justice, and literally the middle of the road, which we should travel in the areas of kindness. People are so charitable they can give the whole entire storehouse and done an incredible wrong by doing so. So stay tuned for the third part of Kindness, a Means to an End. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, and be part of the Ways of Israel. You can give contribution. You can go right here on our Facebook and become a member. Our membership is only $100 a year, and we will send you an ID card with your picture and our Ways of Israel logos. So be part of what we're doing. Share with others this incredible teaching and learn to be part of Israel. Shalom.